Carrie has this awesome video about how the Xbox Series S can mean that a Microsoft handheld is coming. And if you haven't watched that video, go watch it because it's awesome. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description if Carrie will send that to me. The Microsoft handheld is not made by Microsoft. It's made by Asus. We've got May 11th or 12th. I can't remember what friggin' day it is. Whatever day it is, it's like 10 days away or maybe 9 days away, that we're going to find out more about it. But we got prices actually leaking. Last episode, we were talking about it, that Carrie had said that people were trying to read the tea leaves and that the Asus ROG Ally is, by the way, hold on. I'm going to stop everything for a second. Do you guys say Rogue Ally or ROG Ally? Carrie?
ROG. ROG.
Rich?
I say ROG. I saw someone, I think it was Tucky, say ROG. And I'm like, that sounds good enough. It's faster to say. I might start saying ROG, but okay. I say ROG.
All right. So the price of the ROG, no, I can't say it that way. It's terrible. The ROG Ally, $700, $699. Lower than the price that made me do a double take when Carrie was talking about it. So first off, let us know in chat. What do you guys think about that as a price point? I really want to hear what you guys have to think about this. Russ, $700 for the price point for the Ally. Before you go, that's for the Z1 Extreme. The Z1, $600. Really weird pricing there. What's your thoughts on this, Russ?
I'll tell you, I have not been paying attention to these price leaks because I don't want to get my feelings involved. Like, I don't want to get my hopes up and be like, oh yeah, it's going to be that price, and then get disappointed or surprised. I don't know. I don't have the emotional like headroom for that right now. Like, it's just too close to my heart. And so I haven't really been paying attention to those prices. I take it with a grain of salt. You know, I'm always very skeptical about this kind of stuff. Those prices alone, yeah, it sounds great. It sounds amazing. It almost sounds too good to be true. And so I'm not even going to get emotionally invested in that price point.
All right. I was about to say Russ, but instead I'm going to say Rich. Rich, see if we can get this right with your names on my damn screen. The $100 difference between the Z1 and the Z1 Extreme, does that make any sense to you?
No. Yeah, so a few people in my Discord and in the comments have brought out the conspiracy theories that this is just a way to make the Z1 Extreme look more attractive. I don't know enough. I really don't know at this point. That the prices don't make sense to me. The other thing I saw was that the benchmarks, some people think they're closer than they expected them to be between the Z1 and the Z1 Extreme. So I was actually looking for kind of the Fox's thoughts on that. Carrie, your thoughts? Because the next point was that it seems that it is in fact sort of memory bound. They are going with the dual channel, and so that seems to be a factor. So is the fact that it's memory bound here mean that those benchmarks will in fact be closer, and then that's why those prices make sense? I don't know. So that I was actually going to look to you guys for that.
Carrie, answer the man. What do you think?
Yeah, so to answer it briefly, the reason why you see the Z1 being so close to the Z1 Extreme is because, number one, they do share the same amount of memory bandwidth between both platforms. Having said that, even though that it is 3 times less compute that it has, the reality is that the Z1 Extreme, it doesn't need to go full clocks before it will saturate how much memory it's getting in. It'll just be waiting on memory before it can do more work. Whereas the Z1 itself, it can just keep on pushing power and going up in clocks and be fed that same amount of memory and work within that same thing. So it's almost like a very clear picture that you have right in front of your eyeballs that you can see without a doubt. We are severely memory starved on these platforms. So what is happening here, and it's not saying they're showing 30-watt TDP benchmarks here. And that's wise because that's going to paint the Z1 in a better picture, because as we start downclocking and putting less power into these machines, that's where you're going to start seeing a bigger difference. And that's where the Z1 Extreme is going to find its footing a lot better, because this is the same argument that I made on the Xbox Trojan Horse thing, but also the same argument why the Xbox Series X is a better machine than the PS5, because you look at the Xbox Series X, it has more CUs and less frequency, but gets more throughput, more compute. And then you go versus the PS5, and you look at, they have less CUs, but they are at the 11th hour they pushed frequency like crazy, just to catch up to the Xbox Series X. They're actually still behind, but you look at the difference, and it's like, 10.4 teraflop on PS5 and 12 teraflop on Xbox Series X. But the PS5, even though it has less power, is using more actual power. Less performance is using actual more power, because it costs so much. The curve on power isn't linear. There's like a hockey stick growth in terms of, as you keep on pushing more frequency into something, it gets really out of hand. So this is where you're seeing where the Z1 is. You're just pushing a bunch of power into it. The memory is able to keep up with it, and we're getting into this area where it can match up with the Z1 Extreme, but it doesn't paint any other picture than the Z1 Extreme being memory starved. But if we looked at 15 watt and below, we're actually going to see better numbers on the Z1 Extreme. In which case, Rich's point, the $100 difference doesn't make much sense to me at all.
Yeah, so that, I mean, if the $100 price difference doesn't make any sense, then that leads me to believe that this $700 price point is incorrect, and it would actually be the $800 price point that would make more sense, where it's $200 more expensive than the other one. I almost feel like they made a mistake by going with that smaller one, but there's people in chat that are saying it's so that the more expensive one looks more attractive. It's the same thing that Apple does, where they're like, okay, you got this phone, you can buy this phone,
right,
or for this much more, you can get this phone. And then you're like, okay, maybe I'll get that phone. And they're like, well, you know what? For, if you want a little more storage, you can get this one. And it friggin' works on me. I got the biggest, most expensive one because I'm a dummy. But hey, it's okay, because I wanted it. I've bought it for a couple of years now, and it's fine. But I think that pricing is really interesting. Russ said something very interesting at the beginning of this topic. He said, I don't want to get my hopes up. If the price is a penny more than $700, this is like, they should have already come out and said it. Like, when that price leaked, Asus should have said, you know what? I know that we said we were going to talk about it on the 12th, but that's not accurate. For them to just sit quietly on it, I think that it has to be right. And I almost think that it's them leaking this on purpose, just to kind of get us to it's working, to get us to constantly talk about this over and over and over again. Because every week for 3 weeks now, we've been talking about the ROG Ally on this show. So yeah, they've got our number. Go ahead, Rich.
I'll echo that, right? Like, I kind of took the opposite route that Russ did, and I got really invested in it. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. This is super exciting. And so, yes, I'm in the same boat. If that thing is $700 and 1 penny, I'm going to be devastated.
Right. It reminds me a lot of, bringing up the iPhone is, remember all those iPhone leaks, back in the day, when they were just like, oh yeah, this is what they're going to announce here at this next one. Right. And if they didn't announce those things that were kind of like, even like CNN was covering like, hey, these are going to be the leaks, and it wasn't those, then people would get disappointed. But then in hindsight, you're like, well, they actually did bring up a lot of neat features and stuff like that, but it's like this collective reasoning of why something should be how it is before the company even gets to announce it. And so I think I learned my lesson from those iPhone things, because I used to get like emotionally caught up in it too. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to see this new feature. And then they wouldn't do it. And I'm like, oh, this thing sucks. I'm like, wait, that's not how I should be thinking, And so that's why I've just kind of, I've been trying to ignore all that stuff.
Well, here you're probably doing the healthy thing. Here's a big question that's one of the things that a lot of people complained about with the Steam Deck when it first came out, is battery life. And I know we're bumping up on an hour already, so we're going to have to keep this pretty short. But in yo base, I like that name, in chat, they said, any word on battery life? And my answer, as somebody who's not super technical, my answer has always been, it just depends on the game, right? But I think what they're saying is, apples to apples comparison. If I'm playing Monster Hunter Rise on the Steam Deck and I'm playing Monster Hunter Rise on the Asus ROG Ally, am I going to get more battery life than I would on one or the other? Now, I'm not 100% sure, but has Asus said how big the battery is in this thing? Rich is saying yes. What's the battery in this thing, Rich?
40 watt hours, so the same as the Steam Deck. And their marketing, I want to make sure I distinguish that, right? Like their marketing has said that you can get the same battery life as the Steam Deck at 15 watts TDP, but you'll get 50% more power, basically 50% more. I don't know. That's again where we go to the marketing. I would again defer to the Fox on whether or not you might actually get that battery life, because the Fox has a good video on sort of how Steam Deck differs from other handhelds when they say 15 watt TDP, what that actually means.
Yeah, so there it remains to be seen when we get them, but somewhere along the line, AMD kind of switched course, and the SMU, the component on the package that controls power tables and frequency and whatnot on these devices, they switched how they were averaging TDP, like how they were doing it. It used to be 80/20, and that's like on Renoir Vega stuff, meaning that if you were to take a look at because the CPU is constantly like ping ponging around, saying, "Okay, this CPU you can do there," and it's actually coming up and going to sleep, trying to be as power efficient as possible. What happens is that because you are saying, "Okay, use 15 watt, go to sleep," if you were to just do that all the time, if you average that out, you'd get like 7 watt. So what they have to do is they have to have an allowance for going over 15 watt. So that is where the difference of this comes in versus the 80/20 versus the 50/50 that the Steam Deck and also a lot of 6800U things do. It used to be on 4800U that if you ran on 15 watt TDP, around like 1% of the time, you would hit 20 watt. Like the package could go to 20 watt, can burst to 20 watt. On the Steam Deck, that bumps up to 8%, and also for other bursting. So it's an an eightfold increase in that burstable allowance. So that's the main difference, and that's where things get a little hairy. It used to be that 15 watt TDP total system power was around 22 watt. And then with the Steam Deck and then later 6800U platforms, that went up to 27 watt. This has a lot to do with how they're doing things now. So this is where the question mark is for the Asus ROG Ally. If it remains the same and SMU is still in this type of burstable way of the 50/50 burstable package, then yes, 100% you should anticipate if you put 15 watt on both platforms, both of them are going to get around 85 minutes of battery life. And that's if you maintain load, right? Like if you consistently have the same load going at that time. So usually when I say 15 watt TDP or any TDP, there's always like a subtext under there that I mean at load at all times. Obviously games don't do this. There could be lots of reasons where something's happening where you could be in one thing, but if you look at a wall, frame rate is going to jump up and the amount of power to look at a wall is nothing. So that's the only where differences come in, right? Like when I say these things, I mean at load. So you're consistently using that power. Basically, if you were to put both scenarios at the same thing, generally speaking, if it has the same type of burstable profile, then yes, you're going to get pretty much exactly the same battery life, but have better performance on the Asus ROG Ally.
But then you've got Windows is a different factor as well. I've seen a lot of people talk about that. Carrie is saying, "No, Bill, shut up. You're wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong."
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, I mean you're still bound by the same TDP that is the SMU is going to basically dictate how power is divided, and this changes based on if it's a CPU only workload or a gaming workload where you have to put all three parts in there: CPU, GPU, and Encore. So you're still have the same cap. Now you could say that Windows is going to have other crap running in the background. You can have some nonsense background process run that will make performance get less, whereas Steam Deck is going to be very streamlined. So there are background processes that I'm not going to argue that on some people's machine, if they install a bunch of crap and just have stuff running in the background, that's non-ideal. Yes, that can happen. But generally speaking, you're not going to come into, when you think about telemetry and all the other stuff, when you look at the apples to apples of it on a clean system, on a clean Windows 11 install, you're not going to see any dramatic difference. Battery life is not going to change as long as you keep the cap the same, because that is the allowance that you're giving to the package, and it's not going to go over what the SMU dictates it can, which is understood between both of them.
Oof. That was a highly technical answer, and I really like that he said burstable over and over and over again. That's a fun word to say.